Sornaraja, I like to ask you about the only proposal which has been put forward by Tamils for a devolution is ISGA, and you was one of the key figures in ISGA. How is all this process first started? Can you tell us a little bit about the history?
Yeah, the ISGA was initiated by the LTTE at a time of a ceasefire brought about by the Norwegian government. So it's during that ceasefire that the LTTE announced that they would be satisfied with an arrangement for the time being. What is significant is that they did not ask for a separate state, but would be satisfied with an arrangement that would constitutionally be within a single state. This is significant because the LTTE was very powerful at that stage. It had significant control over territory in the north and the east of Sri Lanka, and at that time it was willing to say that it would be satisfied with the grant of a large amount of powers to an interim government that would operate within a unitary state. So it's a very significant event that took place. The ISGA, though it's much maligned now, was at that time a major concession that the LTTE made. In that context then, we must see the ISGA as a solution that the Tigers put forward, and a solution which was not taken seriously by the Sinhalese government of that time, or has not been taken seriously as a solution by any of the later governments. It is a basis on which a solution to the crisis in Sri Lanka can be brought about. We must remember that the war, they say, has been won, but the problem still continues to exist. So in that context of the fact that the problem continues to exist, this instrument, the ISGA, becomes very relevant at a time when a constitution is being thought of by the present government of Sri Lanka.
And what are the major elements that constituted in the ISGA, that is Interim Self-Governing Authority, which will satisfy, because most of the foreign governments and others are now thinking about what will satisfy the Tamils the ethnic demands and what they are really fighting for, or they are really looking for. What are the things that contained in the ISGA?
Well, for one thing, I think the ISGA was a forward-looking document. It ensured human rights for all people living within the north and east, which would have meant that it's not only the Tamils, but the Muslims, the Sinhalese, every race that lived within the northeast would have been given their human rights as individuals. The ISGA incorporated all the United Nations human rights instruments. So that's a major plus. It's a fact that the LTTE was willing to set up an administration that would guarantee to all persons living within the north and east the fundamental human rights recognized by the existing international law, even documents that the Sri Lankan government had not acceded to as a state. So this is one factor that has to be taken into account. The second is that it set up ideas about unitary state, and within that unitary state, a wide devolution of power. The wide devolution of power that the LTTE contemplated at that stage was fully justified because the LTTE had territorial control over much of the north and the east. So in that context then, one must remember that nothing more than was being asked for by the LTTE than what they had. They already had territorial control over the northeast. The third factor is that they did not, they were prepared to give up a demand for separation, at least for a short period of time, until things can be ironed out. So in that context then, of course, one must remember that the first word, interim, becomes important because this was going to be an arrangement that would ensure that there would be continuous peace until some negotiated arrangement could be brought about. So, you know, the group was fighting for self-determination. It was willing to give up that struggle for a time so that a negotiated settlement could be brought about. There were other factors like how finance could be distributed, funds could be distributed, how fisheries and other matters could be protected. The criticisms that have been made against the ISGA are completely unjustified. I think people take isolated circumstances, like for example that the ISGA claims control over wide maritime areas. That is not a proper way of looking at the ISGA. Everyone knows that the seas surrounding the northeast provide livelihood for the fishermen of that area. So there's nothing wrong at all in ensuring that the resources of that area are protected. Still today we have disputes relating to fisheries in the maritime areas that surround the northeast. So nothing that was untoward was asked for. People say that the use of the word plenary was improper. That is not quite right, because constitutionally the phrase plenary simply means that full powers must be given over certain designated areas in the document. You know that the very old statute, the Colonial Laws Validity Act, uses the word plenary in order to ensure that colonial legislatures had certain limited powers, whereas all the power was located in the parliament at Westminster during imperial times. So when the Sinhalese critics say that the ISGA wrongfully claimed plenary powers, they simply misunderstand the use of the word plenary. ISGA, in my opinion, was a good starting point on which negotiations could have been brought about. If the Sinhalese government disagreed with it, they could have gone to the table and negotiated their disagreements. Rather, they wanted to scuttle the whole process. They did not put forward a competing document in which they expressed their own views as to what could be given and what could not be given. I think that the ISGA, being the only instrument that was put forward by the Tamils, should be kept in front when a new constitution is drafted for Sri Lanka.
And today the situation is that the two major players during ISGA, what is Chandrika Kumaratunga, who was the president, and Ranil Wickremesinghe, who was the prime minister at that time, who are now talking about a new constitution which will devolve power to Tamils so that everybody can live happily ever after. But at that time, they are not even prepared to talk about devolving power to Tamils. And this proposal has been accepted by nearly 33 countries. Even at that moment, there was a playing of games like she removes the ministers of the Ranil Wickremesinghe government, and now what is happening? What was the real ploy on that issue?
Yeah. Well, I think Mrs. Kumaranatunga probably did not want to see the ISGA go through. I mean, that is a fact. And it is a bit awkward to see her being the chief negotiator for Tamil rights at this present moment. The fact is that she was one of the people who were responsible for the scuttling of the ISGA. She and the then Foreign Minister, Mr. Lakshman Karirgamar, were instrumental in the making of the criticisms of the ISGA and ensuring that the ISGA did not secure the approval that it should have secured. I suppose in justification of Mr. Wickremesinghe, it must be said that at that time he was willing to consider discussing the ISGA. I do not know whether he would continue to take that stance, but at that historical period of time, he was willing to negotiate on the basis of that document. That could not be said of the other people who wielded power within the Sinhalese government at that time. The president had a greater say and control over these events, and she was intent, as was her foreign minister, on ensuring that the ISGA did not succeed.
And again, the TNA was very supportive of ISGA at that time. And what is their position at present, or what do you think the TNA should take from ISGA forward?
I do not say that they must take the ISGA forward, but the fact is that they themselves historically are committed to the Vatukotte resolution, which was a resolution that stems from the Federal Party of the old days, and of course the continuation of that party into the modern TNA would require that they show allegiance to the resolutions that were passed in their historical existence. So it is a bit strange that they should want today to deviate from the stances that were originally taken by their party, even if the circumstances are such that there is a present need for them to come out with this idea under perhaps some pressure, perhaps because there is the Sixth Amendment which says that the existing constitution must be accepted. But we must take a realistic position as far as the Tamil people are concerned, and that position is to ensure that the demand is for the ideas that were stated in early times were kept up in negotiations, while being pragmatic about it and perhaps for the time being adopting a lesser solution. To say that a solution must be set in stone, it would be improper because of the fact that this is a problem that would be an ongoing problem until the rights of the Tamil people are fully realized.
And is it not better that we had, as you said, that whatever the ISGA is proposed and brought about by the eminent professors and other legal experts who have been, how many people was in ISGA?
5 people.
5 people, okay. So those people who are brought in this thing are thought about so many aspects of it. Is it not the better starting point for negotiating the Tamils' rights, even on the part of the constitution, which they are going to do the new constitution.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, none of the people who drafted this resolution, except probably Mr. Rudrakumaran, had any affiliation with the LTTE. We were neutral people. I mean, Mr. Shiva Pasupati had been Attorney General. I'm an academic, and then there was a person from Australia who was in practice, and a person from England who was also in practice. There were 5 lawyers altogether, and we drafted this document with inputs from Canadian lawyers and other lawyers who visited us at that time. We had some assistance from lawyers from other countries, Switzerland and elsewhere. So this was a carefully thought out document. I must say we drafted the document, and it was sent up to the LTTE. The LTTE made no changes to the document that we drafted. I must be quite honest in making this statement. All that the LTTE did, much to our dismay, no doubt, was to add a long rhetorical prefatory statement. The body of the ISGA remained as drafted by us. So, what came out was a long preface as to how the struggle started, why they had to take up arms. I mean, that's well and good. I mean, we were not concerned with the rhetoric of the statement. We were more concerned with the rights that were stated in the ISGA. But it is very important to know that the LTTE, at that time representing the Tamil people, was quite satisfied and made not one change to the ISGA as these 5 people drafted it.
And is it not better that the devolution of powers, which is most talked about, that the question about the devolution of power, is it not better that something like this is based on something like ISGA rather than the current situations what they are talking about, because most of the people are under distress and they are being occupied by army occupation, and the circumstances in which the new constitution is being done is not giving us the right voice. At that time we had a free voice, is right?
That's very true. I think, eventually you must have a settlement to this, because there has been no progress in the country for 50, 60 years, ever since independence was secured. So one must know that generations to come will be saddled with this problem unless it is settled soon. It is futile to think that this war has ended the matter, because there would be future generations that would continue this struggle, not only within Sri Lanka but from outside Sri Lanka. One must remember that the Tamils are a powerful community in the world today, and this has been brought about by the fact that the Sinhalese have ensured a massive outflow of Tamils who live in other countries, and these Tamils are not going to give up the struggle for the people of the north and the east with whom they have ties of blood. So one has to be realistic and ensure that there is a solution that is arrived at, and a solution that is just and is based upon the right of self-determination of the Tamil people. The world is moving towards the recognition of these rights. You see that people in Scotland, the Basques in Spain, the Quebecois in Canada, all around the world, not only in Asia but in the Western countries as well, are fighting for these rights. In the Middle East, you would have the Kurds, in India, the Kashmiris and other groups. So it's an inevitable facet of history that this right should be raised by minorities like the Tamils. I mean, quite apart from the international factors, for the internal peace within this little country, Sri Lanka, it is necessary that they iron out this problem through a strong recognition of the rights of the Tamils, whether through a devolution as suggested in the ISGA, or through a large creation of a larger autonomy to the Tamils. As for example, people have said that there should be a union of states, two states should get together for limited purposes of government, so that there would be a Tamil state and a Sinhalese state and a federated union of states. There are different ways in which this could be done, but a final constitutional arrangement that ensures that the rights of the Tamils are preserved, their rights to land are protected, that their life as independent people continues without any molestation by the army. These things must be assured for a meaningful solution to be reached. One good way of starting that is through the acceptance of the ISGA and at least the use of the ISGA as a basis for the making of a new constitution.